Alright, what's going on, folks? Mr. Brunswold here. Today we're going to be taking some notes on acids and bases. So our goals for today is that you can identify acids and bases based on their chemical formula. There's also another goal I kind of forgot to add it to this slide, but we're also going to be trying to identify the products of an acid-base reaction. So that's a sort of like a secondary goal. You're going to take notes on the chemical formulas of acids and bases. And then you're going to practice identifying acids and bases from their chemical formulas. Okay, so examples of acids. So these are a few from the lab yesterday: HCl, HNO3, and H2SO4. Acids always contain the element hydrogen. So you can see all of these acids start with H. They all start with hydrogen. And a nonmetal. So for the first one, the nonmetal is chlorine. For the second one, the nonmetal is nitrate. That's a polyatomic ion. For the third one, the nonmetal is sulfate. That's also a polyatomic ion. So because the hydrogen is also a nonmetal, the chemicals are covalently bonded. So remember, covalent bonding is when you have a nonmetal and a nonmetal and they're bonded to each other. The general formula for an acid can be seen below. And so that's going to be hydrogen, and next comes the nonmetal. So here's hydrogen, and this one's the nonmetal. So they all sort of follow that formula, right? Like HCl is hydrogen, and then the nonmetal is chlorine. HNO3, H is hydrogen, NO3 is the nonmetal. H2SO4, H2 are our hydrogens. So there can be more than one hydrogen. SO4 is the nonmetal. Okay, so next let's go over some bases. So some examples of bases are NaOH, MgOH2, and NH4OH. I believe these were all in the lab yesterday. Bases usually contain the polyatomic ion hydroxide. So that's this OH that we see at the end for all of these. So since they all end in OH, they all have this polyatomic ion. Polyatomic just means more than one atom, and we call that ion hydroxide. And a metal. So for the first one, the metal is Na, sodium. For the second one, the metal is Mg, which is magnesium. The third one doesn't actually have a metal, right, because nitrogen and hydrogen are actually nonmetals. But NH4 is called ammonium, and that sort of acts like a metal. Most of them will actually have a metal. Okay, and so because the hydroxide is a nonmetal, and so we've got a metal and a nonmetal, those chemicals are going to be ionically bonded. So covalent bonding is when you have a nonmetal and a nonmetal. Ionic bonding is when you have a metal and a nonmetal. The general formula for a base can be seen below. So it's going to be metal and then OH. So M is the metal, OH is the hydroxide. Okay, and so then what we're going to do is go through this list and try to determine whether each species is an acid, a base, or a neutral compound. This first one starts with a hydrogen. That lets us know that it's an acid. The second one ends in OH. That lets us know that it's a base. This third one doesn't start with hydrogen and it doesn't end with OH. That lets us know that it's neutral. So go through each one of these, try to identify whether it's an acid, a base, or neutral. Okay, and then after you do that, we're going to go through some examples of acid-base reactions. So our first reaction, we're going to take HCl and react it with NaOH. And so this is our acid, this is our base. Our second one, we're going to take HNO3 and react it with NH4OH. So this one's our acid, this one's our base. In our third one, we're going to take H2SO4 and react it with MgOH2. So this one's our acid, and this one's our base. Okay, when we react HCl with NaOH, what we're doing is this is called the double replacement reaction. So you learned about these back during your reaction unit, but we're just going to review. So in a double replacement, the hydrogen is going to switch places with the sodium. When that happens, we're going to end up with NaCl. So now the Na is paired up with the chlorine, and the hydrogen is going to be paired up with the H2O. With the OH to make H2O. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing down here. We're going to switch the hydrogen and the NH4. So now we're going to have NH4NO3 and H2O. Then we're going to do the same thing in the third one. We're going to switch the hydrogen with the magnesium. So we're going to have MgSO4. So now the Mg is paired up with the SO4. And in this one, we're going to have two waters. So why do we have two waters? Well, that's because there's two hydrogens, there's two hydroxides. And so these two acids and bases, so this acid and this base actually react with each other twice to make two different waters. Okay, and so when acid and bases react, they form two products. A neutral ionic compound, so that would be like NaCl, NH4NO3, MgSO4. Those would all be examples of neutral ionic compounds, right? Compounds that don't start with H or end in OH. And water. Because both of the products are neutral, acid-base reactions are often called neutralization reactions, right? Because we neutralize the acid with the base. We neutralize the base with the acid, and neither of the products are an acid or a base. The general formula for an acid-base reaction can be seen below. And so we've got our hydrogen and our nonmetal, so that one's an acid. We have our metal and our hydroxide, that's our base. So the acid plus the base is going to give us, well, the hydrogen's going to switch places with the metal. It's going to give us the metal and the nonmetal bonded to each other. And so that gives us a neutral ionic compound, right? Just a metal and a nonmetal. No hydrogen, no hydroxide. And water, right? So one of the products is always going to be water for these reactions. Okay, let's go over one more example. So in here, we're going to predict the products of each of the following acid-base reactions. So again, hydrogen and potassium for this one are going to switch places. That's going to give us KBr and HOH, or water. Right? So KBr and H2O should be your products for this one. All right, give that a try. Try to predict the products of these other reactions. And let me know if you have any questions.